Good evening, everybody. This is Mr. Geocon speaking tonight. I am here as just by myself. This is a quick take stream. Essentially, what I want to do as an experiment is to try and see if I can't just have just make a quick take. It's going to be my raw, unscripted thoughts on whatever topic comes to mind. I'll be a bit rambly. You'll get to experience all the ums and ahs and stuttering and stammering. It'll be great. It'll be a blast. And I see that I have three people watching this. Thank you so much for watching this and giving this chance. I hope that you all have fun during this stream. Be sure to leave all the comments you like. It's not like that there's going to be very many people here. The joys of being a small YouTuber. Anyways, I'm actually I right in front of me. I was just reading a book called of classical mythology by a man named H.A. Gerber, I believe. H.A. Gerber. It's a weird name. The last name spelled Guerber, and it's a translation that has all of the ancient. It's a early translation of all of the ancient classical myths, the Greek and Roman mythology figures and stories are all found in there, and it's very pertinent to what I want to talk about today, which is sort of the destruction of virtue and heroism in the modern day. Now, sorry, what got me thinking about this? Well, I recently had a private discussion with one of my acquaintances, Endeavor. You should go and check out his channel. He's pretty good. And he got around to talking about Lawrence of Arabia, which is going to be his live stream that he's going to be doing with Morgoth. He's going to be doing live streams on movies from now on, with Morgoth, I mean. And we got around to talking about historical epics. Now, those are his more his deal than mine. I myself am more into classical mythology, Norse mythology, just general myths and legends and fairy tales, things like that have always fascinated me. But Endeavor has been into historical epics, and it's very clear from the kinds of movies he talks about, which, by all accounts, he's pretty good at talking about these things. But I wanted to really highlight what he said to me, which was in post-modernity, it seems as though the idea of heroism has pretty much died because we can't really, there's not really something higher than the self that we can really aspire to, because all of our meta narratives have been taken away. Um, and this is very apparent with the left, because if you see the left, what does modern society, what does the left see as being heroic? Well, if you are well, the if you're the average person, the, honestly, it's very hard to see what is heroic to the average person. It's going to be a different answer because the average person is going to be taught, everybody gets a medal, everybody gets a little bit of something, everybody gets a prize for decency. Niceness is the paradigm of morality now. Niceness is the virtue that rules. And I talked a bit about why this is a bad thing in my thoughts line video. Essentially, but these people don't seem to have a definition of niceness. Never mind that. Um, the niceness seems to be the only virtue left because it seems to be all that's keeping together this uh, this shit show that we call a society at this point. It's the only thing that's keeping people from tearing each other apart and just destroying each other over partisan politics is a sense of propriety, a sense of, well, that wouldn't be very nice now, would it? That sort of feeling. And in such an environment, it's no wonder that there isn't really an idea of heroism, because heroism requires virtue, and virtue requires some kind of higher social order that you can be a part of and strive to improve and embody. But let's start over from the beginning, from the top, What is it that what does it mean to be virtuous? What does it mean to be heroic? Because virtue and heroism, those are pretty much the same thing, in my eyes, at least. You know, because virtue ethics, in a nutshell, is the idea that there are these certain ideal character traits that we're supposed to have, and these character traits are embodied in some kind of heroic figure. The people who created this idea of virtue ethics, people like Plato and Aristotle, for them, the hero was Socrates. Socrates was the ideal person within Plato's understanding of morality, and so he constructed his ethical framework based on the traits he admired in his teacher, and th- and that's why he had this idea of the philosopher king who rules through reason. He had the idea that the material world was not as important as the spiritual and immaterial world, that justice required a correct ordering of the self. But this kind of and this was inherited by Aristotle, who is someone that I more follow after than Plato, although both are, the differences between Plato and Aristotle are exaggerated somewhat by certain modern thinkers. The two of them are actually they actually have a lot in common, but some people. What I would say is that Aristotle's a bit more down to earth, because if you look at something like the politics, it's clear that Plato, while he had some good ideas, he was being very he was all over the place. He was very much looking in the clouds for inspiration rather than seeing things for as they are on Earth. But that's besides the point. That's the point. The point is, both of them agreed on things like virtue, things like having an orderly life, and the idea of a hero being someone who embodies these ideal character traits, these virtues. And in the Christian context, it's in the Christian context, virtue ethics was adopted by Christianity because they were influenced by these philosophers, by Plato and Aristotle, and it was fairly simple for them to substitute Socrates for Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus of Nazareth became their uh, ideal, became the ideal because he is literally the God man. He is a God who he is the God who became man. He is the logos, the one in the beginning, the alpha omega, etc. So why wouldn't he be the ideal hero? Why wouldn't he? Um, uh, sorry. So we get this idea of virtue ethics, and we also get this idea of natural law, which goes hand in hand with virtue ethics. Now, natural law is a bit older, and it arguably comes from the ancient Greek poetry, like things like Antigone, which was an inspiration to pre-Socratic philosophers. Now, if you've ever read the Greek tragedy Antigone, I highly recommend it. It's a very good play, but the story is essentially one in which the king is violating the king refuses to enact a burial of somebody he hated. I think it was like a hated enemy, a rebellious a family member. I think it's been a while since I read it, but anyway, he refused to do this burial of in accordance with the laws of God, laws of the gods. And Antigone, the main character, tries to convince the king to do what the gods will, and the king is like, "Well, I am the king. I my word is the law, and to prove it, I'll just kill anybody who disagrees with me." And that kind of attitude leads to his downfall. It leads to the destruction of his loved ones because he refused to obey the laws of the gods. And the sort of moral universe depicted in Antigone is one in which there is a cosmic law, a cosmic order that the political order uh, must adhere to, just as normal mortals should adhere to the political order. Okay, and this kind of and the idea that the universe is orderly in some fashion is actually it's not something that's universal across mankind. There were several different cultures that believed in a chaotic and wild universe. Uh, the ancient Babylonians come to mind. Uh, you also had the Aztecs arguably had this idea. A lot of these different cultures had this idea of chaos being the order, being chaos isn't the order. Chaos, the universe being chaotic. I meant, and not the universe being orderly, like what is depicted in Antigone. And through this natural law tradition, by the time you reach Plato, you have this idea of having a orderly self, an orderly political society, and an orderly universe. You know, the politics should conform to the natural order of the universe, and then the self should also uh, it, the self should um, conform to the political order and to the cosmic order, and that kind of hierarchy exists. But each order has is reflected in each other. The order of the self is reflected in the order of society, which is reflected in the order of the cosmos. For example, in Plato, Plato believed that the um, the self was consisted of the reason, which allowed you to see the forms, see truth, goodness, and beauty. Uh, You had spirit, which allowed you to exhibit honor and courage and righteousness, and the appetite, which was your desire, just your base desires, your base animal desires to eat, sleep, and have sex. All right, and so you had that, and so Plato believed that reason was on top, and then you had the spirited self that acted as the servant of reason and helped rein in the base animal desires. For the political order, Plato saw that the republic was to be ruled by a philosopher king, and and the philosopher king would be totally focused on reason and being a good person, and they would and the this philosopher king would come out of a military class that was made up of very spirited individuals that were driven by honor and virtue. And then the rest of society was the equivalent of this kind of base appetite. Um, and while the base appetite, interestingly enough, it's not a totalitarian system, because the ordinary people were free for the most part to do what they pleased, so long as they lived good and decent lives. But it was the upper classes, the military and the philosopher kings, who had to forsake private property, who had to raise their children in common, etc., so that they could concentrate on being virtuous. It's sort of like it was kind of discipline you'd find in a military barrack or a monastery. And then in this political order reflected the cosmos, which was ruled by a spiritual that had this spiritual rule over it, God and the forms, and then and then that existed above the material realm. So the basic idea of natural law is that nature is orderly, and both individual behavior and the political order must reflect the orderliness of nature and of the cosmic order. And this plays into virtue ethics by, the character traits are that are chosen. What is heroic is what is conducive to this overall three orders, this order of the self, of the politics, and of the cosmos. And we Aristotle had this idea of telos, that of like ends, and you could have a social telos, like say you're a firefighter, so in order to be your telos would be to save people from fires and put out fires, and you and so to be a good firefighter is to follow your telos of putting out fires. But there's also natural teloses that come from nature, like um, it's human nature for a man and woman to marry and have children, and so that's it. And so being a good person involves following that natural inclination. And so Christianity absorbed this idea, but when you fast forward to the wars of religion and the Reformation, what you find is increasingly people are getting tired of the Catholic Church. And, Aristotle, for better or worse, had become it had been seen as being monopolized by the church. As in, if you were an Aristotelian, if you were a scholastic, you were seen as being uh, pro papacy. And so people felt that they needed a way to break away from the church and that included a way to break away from Aristotle and introduce new ideas. And this is where you had Descartes and the rationalists, and Francis Bacon and the empiricists, both two sides of the same coin. They both rejected Aristotle and in different ways, but what both sides essentially did was chuck out telos. They got rid of the idea of teleology, and instead they convinced themselves that morality could be based off of people's subjective desires and subjective needs, because they thought that these subjective desires and needs were somehow universal to all mankind. And you get this impression from people like Adam Smith and people like David Hume and John Locke, who all had that impression and all justified liberalism in liberal natural law, essentially based on these supposed universal desires that all men are supposed to have. And it became very apparent over time that this does not work. We don't have universal desires. People want different things. And so now we have end up in the modern day with what is good is simply what fulfills me. What is good is what I desire, and what is bad is what prevents me from getting what I desire. And that's sort of an outgrowth of Enlightenment thinking. Now, the Enlightenment philosophers themselves, would they have supported such a thing? Of course not. They believed in objective morality, and they argued for natural law of a kind. The Enlightenment philosophers were just trying to break away from Catholic teaching, but as a Catholic, I would have said that's bad enough, because they're breaking away from the heart and soul of what it means to be a Westerner. The Catholic Church did found the West, and so if you were break away from her is to break away from what it meant to be the West. But what these people were trying to do was reconcile this new break from Aristotelian metaphysics, reconcile that with traditional morality, traditional ethics. They were trying to save that from this radical break, and obviously they failed. Oh, we have some people saying howdy. I'm sorry. I've been telling a story. Uh, anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. And that gets me to an interesting point that I want to mention, which is the critical theorists, the original ones, the Frankfurt School types. Adorno. I'm thinking Adorno and Horkheimer specifically. They wrote a lot about this process in a book called The Dialectics of Enlightenment. And what these Frankfurt School types were trying to do is explain why there wasn't an arrival of class consciousness among the proletariat in Western countries. And what they came up with was that they partitioned reason into two different types of reasoning: subjective reason and objective reason. Subjective reason was also known as instrumental reason, because subjective reason was about just finding the most efficient way to get what you want. You know, if I am a person who's hungry, subjective reasoning allowed me to get what I needed in the most efficient way possible. That's one idea of reasoning. And the other type of reasoning is value reasoning, objective reasoning. Objective reasoning isn't it asks what should you want? What should I value? That's the kind of objective reasoning. And you'll find that objective reasoning, if you're an Aristotelian, you realize that objective reasoning could only happen if you have an idea of telos, if you have an idea that there are these objective purposes within nature and within society. But the Enlightenment sort of chucked that out. You know, if you ask most modern scientists and most people like that, they would say that teleology doesn't exist, and that has the consequence of getting rid of in ethics as we've known it for the past several thousand years. Yeah, you know, and so by slow process that is talked about in dialectics of enlightenment, you find that you chuck out teleology and down the line, as the liberal tradition unfolds and the logical conclusions of this are thought out by very smart people. Uh, Value reasoning basically disappears. The people in charge don't really have an idea of what we should want. Instead, you get people like F.A. Hayek, who was promoted by the way, F.A. Hayek, he's not an enemy of the establishment. He was heavily promoted by the cathedral back in the day, back in his heyday. Uh, you get people like F.A. Hayek who have this kind of value subjectivism, where they think that in order to have a good political order, basically we just need to have capitalism fulfill all of our desires, fulfill all of what we want. And the fight between capitalists and socialists was essentially like, what kind of system would fulfill our desires best? Would it be like a central planner, or would it be a free market? But it wasn't really about what we should want, and that was sort of what the fascists tried to uh, accomplish. Of course, they didn't really. They exposed the failure of fascism exposed the problem that it comes from trying to create like an objective valuation, and that is you can go very wrong when you do it. And this is what people in the critical theory school, the people in the Frankfurt School, believed happened in Germany. People in Germany did not have an idea of what was good, because they had been exposed to hundreds of years of liberalism and Enlightenment thinking. They could not understand that what was happening around them was objectively evil. And they also said that this is also behind class consciousness, because people were so busy on doing things as efficiently as possible that they didn't see that, what they were chasing after was just illusions created by capitalism to perpetuate itself, and they weren't getting their true needs fulfilled. That's why there wasn't any workers' consciousness. Now, yeah, I mean, moving aside from like the Marxism, uh, I think that they are essentially correct in diagnosing what we are seeing in the modern day, what we're seeing in popular culture, what we're seeing in the more degenerate morals. People are focused on trying to fulfill their desires as efficiently as possible, and they're not stopping to think, well, what should I want? And the reason why this is dangerous is that people's desires can be easily manipulated. First off, um, you can. They talk about the idea of the culture industry and how mass production has allowed people to essentially manipulate consumers into buying whatever they want, whatever the people in charge want, and that's a problem. Also, get mixed signals. People's desires shift all the time. People want different things at any given moment. And so you get this kind of constant back and forth schizophrenia because you're constantly bombarded with all these messages like, oh, have this, have that, have this, have that, have this, have that. And with all this confusion, it's no wonder that this mass media has led this mass media has led to a sort of postmodern condition where nobody's sure exactly what they should want. Uh, all that's left is again this idea of, oh, just going to be nice. And going back to Endeavor, when he talked about like why is it that we can't get historical epics anymore, why are these heroes in Marvel movies fake? I think the answer to that and is that we don't really have an idea of like a moral universe anymore. I mean, the closest thing that the most dominant thing right now is anti-racism, which is what Endeavor says is essentially a consequentialist worldview that says that the material benefit that puts the material benefit of non-white peoples as being a moral good, and the material benefit of white peoples as a moral evil. And it's very cynical. It's obviously very cynical. Obviously just it's obviously a justification for liberals to explain away why the civil rights era failed, why civil rights failed to uplift the black community. Oh, there's this systemic racism under the bed. Uh, but this kind of but it's manifestly consequentialist. There's no heroes in there's no anti-racist heroes, uh, because it's any anti-racist hero. Like what is the character traits that embody an anti-racist hero? What kind of character traits would they have besides this vague idea of, oh, I'm just a nice person? It's contentless. It's indeterminate. It can be anything so long as they spout the correct talking points, which obviously is not good. So when you come out with Marvel movies, they they have heroes. The heroes in Marvel movies like Captain America and Thor and Iron Man. These are in another era. They would have been heroes. They would have been mythological heroes, paragons of whatever society they're a part of. And because they clearly have a lot of the masculine virtues that you would see in earlier works. However, what is the greater political order that they're a part of, that they reflect? Uh, Liberalism does not reflect what they embody. So they seem like almost an anachronism, really. They seem like they just incongruent, and it comes across as very fake too. And it, and as we're progressing towards like this woke agenda, this woke ideology being the new moral paradigm, we're going to see this sort of facade peel away, and we'll have heroes that reflect the moral order of the now, and it'll be they will not be heroic. Let's just say, at least not in the traditional sense. So what we would have, I think, in order to get back to a kind of heroism is to recognize that the sort of personal heroism of a real hero needs to in some way reflect the ideals of the society, and also the natural law, the cosmic order as a whole. And these three layers have to reflect each other in some way in order for you to have heroism. Eh, and I think that's all that I have right now. I I hope that's it. I hope that answers what some of Endeavor's concerns, really. Uh, so anybody in the chats, I see that I have all of 5 people. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'd like to hear what your thoughts on this were in the comment in these kinds of live chat. I'd like to see the live viewer comments. Um, See what you have to say. Hmm. I suppose is hmm. Am I? I like cool stream. Yes. Well, thank you, Kai. That's very kind of you. I liked this stream too. I think it was just my attempt at trying to come up with a it's just my attempt to coming up with just a quick take, because sometimes I have this desire to just say whatever, and it's not and I don't think I could put it into a video. I mean, the video, can you imagine a video on this topic? It'd be an edited video on this topic would be a pain, because it's just, how would I organize it? What kind of slideshow would I use? No, no. I just want to get these thoughts out there so that I can sort of uh, sort of have these stream of consciousness streams. I see AAK is busy driving, LOL. Yeah, I understand, man. We have I hope you drive safely. God knows. we have a very chaotic world right now, and I think honestly, I think you need some kind of traditional understanding of religion. If you're not a Christian, at least look into things like Platonism and Aristotelianism. You need an idea of a cosmic order in order to obtain virtue. Um, I mean, we can't really this the kind of order, the kind of cosmology behind things like progressivism is really chaotic, actually. Trying to text a girl I like, and I'm using some of the points you've made in this. Well, Kai, that's very nice. If I were to summarize what the kinds of points I made, it would be that the idea of you know, virtue ethics is about having a certain ideal character traits. The embodiment of those character traits is the hero, and we need to have an idea of natural law, teleology, in order to have this and have an idea what ideal character traits there should be, and we and the problem with modernity is that we've completely lost this idea of natural law, teleology, and subsequently virtue ethics. Enlightenment philosophers tried to save it, but that's they gradually fell apart. Your thoughts on Indiana Jones? My thought on Indiana Jones is that it is definitely a throwback to the pulps. I mean, if you look at any of George Lucas's works, Star Wars or Indiana Jones, these works were both throwbacks Pulp Fiction, throwbacks to older works from the early 20th century. It's sort of and you look at. I mean, if you look at all of the stuff, any of the really popular stuff nowadays, it's all throwbacks to the pulps. For instance, you could say that Star Wars is sort of the science fantasy type pulps. You could say that Indiana Jones, it has the kind of proto superhero type pulps. Superheroes themselves are throwbacks to things like Zorro and Doc Savage. Things like that are essentially the in a way they are the last gasp of what it meant to be a hero. uh those were like the last gasp of the hero before you had the 1960s and this kind of constant cultural revolution, where we just sort of decided that it's forbidden to forbid, and and we just need to pursue this kind of gratification utopianism. I mean, but it still compels people. But now it's made to serve. Things like Indiana Jones are now made to serve the interests of consumers as a sort of escape from boring, mundane reality. Oh, I can, if I'm like an overweight mama's nerd, mama basement nerd, I can I can watch Indiana Jones, and vicariously through him, I can punch Nazis and save the day. Skellington says that his car broke down for the second time in a row coming home from school. Uh, well, I hope everything is all right with you, man. I hope that you you have you're able to get your car fixed. I hope that everything is all right with you. God, Let's all pray for Skellington here. Mm. All right, that was a good prayer. Uh, yeah, I think this is 45 minutes is a bit much for a quick take. uh, well, Skellington, I I really wish I could help you, man. Um, all I'm offering my prayers to you, and I hope God helps you out, keeps you safe and secure in these trying times. Anyways, I think this about wraps up the stream. I honestly think that I've gone on long enough. I got what I wanted to say out there, and if Royal Endeavor, if you're watching this, was I hope this was enlightening somewhat to you. I know I can be a bit rambly at times, but maybe that's good for these live streams. These little quick takes, quote unquote quick takes, uh, could help me get this out of my system so that I can better concentrate on more important projects. Uh, I think this was very easy for me to do, and I think yeah, I think I'm going to be doing more of these in the future. So, anyways, I hope all of you have a good night. God bless and Ave Maria.